So the fiction and the facts about remittances being a key engagement mechanism for overseas Sri Lankans. Yes, there is a little bit of fact in there also, because we saw how important remittances have been over the years as a means of earning foreign exchange to Sri Lanka, especially when we much needed foreign exchange, and how it happened when overseas Sri Lankans stopped sending remittances to Sri Lanka, how much we struggled. So there is a lot of truth in there. That's a lot of fact in there. But we need to understand, among the overseas Sri Lankans, we cannot consider that everybody is sending regular remittances in the same manner. I'm emphasizing regular here. Because if we look at overseas Sri Lankans, we can break them into two broad groups as permanent migrants and temporary migrants. It's often the temporary migrants who will regularly remit to Sri Lanka, regularly send financial remittances to Sri Lanka. Because why? They are temporary migrants, they have an intention of coming back, plus they would have gone alone, leaving their family behind, and the family is much reliant on this regular monthly remittances that they send. On the other hand, when we look at permanent migrants, they often leave as a family together, leaving no one at home to send regular remittances. Sometimes there might be, if it is an older individual, maybe there are parents back at home, but then often the parents are not so reliant on the migrants' remittances, the permanent migrants' remittances, or the connection, the link might be distant, that the remittances are not coming regularly. So the economic emphasis on remittances with overseas Sri Lankans is mostly related to the temporary segment of overseas Sri Lankans, temporary migrants of overseas Sri Lankans. But now, why are we so focused, so fixated about financial remittances? There's more to it, right? There's more to remittances than financial remittances. There's social remittances, which has equal or more potential to contribute to the Sri Lankan economy as well as engage with the overseas Sri Lankans. So when we say social remittances, it was mentioned before also today, it could be ideas, identities, behaviors, or social capital that is transferred across two countries, the host country of the migrant and the country of origin, that will be Sri Lanka. So this can come across as knowledge transfer, like our keynote speaker mentioned. It could be coming as connections. I think the most important is the connections, where a professor in an overseas university can offer opportunities for Sri Lankan students to go overseas. Or it can be an investor wanting to bring in finances or investment to Sri Lanka, or connecting an exporter to the foreign market. So there are many ways that goes beyond remittances. So I would like to highlight a couple of examples in terms of the nexus where overseas Sri Lankans are connected to the Sri Lankan economy in terms of trade and investment. Theoretically, there are two main mechanisms where trade and investment can come into Sri Lanka through the overseas Sri Lankans. That is through offshoring, or that is the overseas Sri Lankans establishment or production of services or goods can be outsourced to Sri Lanka. Or the other way is where an overseas Sri Lankan could act as an agent for some product or service that is being manufactured in Sri Lanka. So when it comes to outsourcing, I think the very much talked about example is Virtusa, which was started by two Sri Lankans some time ago, and now it is one of the leading global IT service providers. It has over 35,000 workers across 25 countries, and this was started by Sri Lankans. So imagine the power it has. And in 2020, it had over $1.3 billion in global revenue. And to date, Virtusa considers Sri Lanka as one of their primary outsourcing locations and gives a lot of opportunities for Sri Lankan workers. And in Sri Lanka, it is one of the key IT sector employers. So it has helped in the human capital development in Sri Lanka in aspects of IT sector, and it helps to retain Sri Lankan talent pool, because we are facing a lot of issues with brain drain right now. We all know that. And then another example is in terms of the apparel sector, where again two Sri Lankans had started a children's wear apparel company called Lucky and Me. So they outsource their apparel production to Sri Lankan factories. So again, there is economic activity coming back to Sri Lanka. And then when we look at this functioning as an agent to a Sri Lankan product or service, that is a very interesting example where Walters Bay was a company again set up by a Sri Lankan in Texas, and this is into tea. So they partnered with Bogavantalava plantations in Sri Lanka some time back, and what they did was they realized that the Sri Lankan tea had by that time had not tapped into the iced tea market in the US. So Walters Bay connected with Bogavantalava plantations and guided them to develop a flavor profile specifically to the US market for packaged iced tea. So they gave the guidance, they gave the market conditions and the understanding, and eventually in 2005, I think, together this combined effort product won the first place in a global tea expo as the best commercially brewed iced tea. So there are many ways that overseas Sri Lankans can connect with the Sri Lankan economy and the Sri Lankan population that goes beyond financial remittances. And another way is, I'm not going to talk much about it, but overseas Sri Lankans coming back as tourists, that has huge potential because we know much of the overseas Sri Lankans now very well established would want or are in the retirement age, would appreciate the kind of retirement living in Sri Lanka or enjoying some part of their holiday or Ayurvedic tourism, that sort of. So there is a lot of potential to engage with overseas Sri Lankans that goes beyond financial remittances. So I'll stop here. We can discuss more later. Thank you.